Welcome to the MrpTech Podcast. This is episode number 36. This is a weekly podcast where I discuss everyday tech for everyday people. My name is Matt. I am your host, and thanks so much for listening to this podcast this week. I'm going to start off today's episode with a little bit of feedback. And over the last few weeks, I've covered a lot of different topics, and one of those being the new MacBook Pros and my thoughts on the touch bar for the new MacBook Pro. And right after last week's episode was published, I received an email from the DoorToDoorGeek, and he sent me a link to look at, in which I think he sent me the most useful feature that the MacBook Pro has to offer in its new touch bar. And of course, what I mean by that is someone figured out how to get the classic video game Dune running on the MacBook Pro touch bar. And the link that he sent me showed a video of Dune being played right on the touch bar. And it immediately gave me that nostalgia factor. It brought me back to the mid-1990s when Dune first came out, and playing it, the recognizable music that goes along with playing Doom. And of course, this isn't serious at all, but it's really funny that somebody was actually able to get Doom running in this new MacBook Pro touch bar. And the best thing about it is I had no idea this would even be possible. The MacBook Pro touch bar has a resolution of 2170 by 60, and this article basically goes on to state it's basically a very thin, elongated Apple Watch is basically what the touch bar is. And beyond that, I had really no idea that people still even played this game. I guess I knew it was around in a few different settings, and I knew the movie came out just recently as well. But the funny thing behind it is there's a group of people who enjoy getting Doom to run on various things such as ATMs, printers, digital pianos, calculators. Somebody's even managed to get Doom running on a chainsaw. List goes on and on. They even got an instance of Doom working on a terminal within the Doom game itself. It just cracks me up, the ideas that people can come up with. And, there's been a lot of criticism with this new MacBook Pro and this whole touch bar idea. And yes, there are a lot of ideas that people are coming up with to make it useful. But I still honestly think that the touch bar is a gimmick. But this was a great a link, and I'll put it in the show notes if anybody wants to see it. It's definitely a nostalgic trip to see Doom again, even if it's on a small, really thin screen on the new MacBook Pro. So it really makes me want to go find a ROM and play that old game. So I may just have to do that at some point in time. Maybe Good Old Games has it or somewhere. If anybody knows how to find the original Doom game that I can play on either a Mac or Linux, send me an email, and I'll be glad to check it out. It'd be worth playing one more time, I think. So thanks, Dor, for sending that in so that I can put it in today's episode. He knows that I like to cover Mac things once in a while. So going on next, something exciting that I found just over the weekend. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I know I did. It was a lot of fun, and I didn't get involved with Black Friday shopping at all. We chose to stay in and relax, and we've got a very busy couple of weeks coming up over the next few weeks, and it was nice just to stay home and chill out for a little bit. But one of the things that I found exciting, I came across another article over the weekend about an upcoming movie that's in the works, or even a TV show. And about over a year ago now, I started getting into listening to audiobooks on my way to work. I have an hour commute to work and an hour commute back, and I really enjoy listening to podcasts, but I also wanted to learn about new things and use that time to read books or listen to books that I don't normally have time to read. Somewhere around last February-ish, I decided to read the book Dune. And many of you who might be science fiction readers or science fiction fans are probably well aware of Frank Herbert's setting in the Dune universe. And as I read the book, at first it really didn't appeal to me that much. It sort of had an older feel to it. It was put out in 1965. However, as it went on, I became sort of sucked into this universe, and it was a really compelling story. And as I kept listening to it, I was wishing that there was a movie that I could watch after I finished reading. And of course, I found out there was a movie made back in 1984 by David Lynch. And about 5 minutes into the movie, I decided this wasn't really my thing. I didn't really want to watch it. And it did sort of become a cult classic as time went on. But I just really couldn't sit through that first Dune movie. But I came across an article this weekend about a new up-and-coming version of Dune that is in the works, either going to be reworked into a mini-series on TV or a series of movies in the future. It was picked up by the production company called Legendary Entertainment. And Legendary Entertainment has put out movies like Pacific Rim and Warcraft and Jurassic World. So I'm really intrigued at the fact that this is in the works. I know in the past, in the early 2000s, there was also a TV miniseries of Dune, but I really hope that the development process for this movie and the production is high quality, and they really give Dune the justice that it deserves for either a good miniseries or movie release or releases, because there's so much that original book Dune has to offer. So if you're a big Dune fan, I encourage you to check out the article about the up-and-coming movie or TV series. There's not a whole lot of information out there yet. I know between 2008 and 2011, they tried to reimagine Dune, and it just didn't work out. It was a different production company at that time. I believe it may have been Paramount. I'm not exactly sure, but there's hope anyway. So that was exciting news over the weekend. Going on to some more feedback. I received another email just shortly after the last episode was published. And this was actually not an email. This was a comment on YouTube. This comment was from Tux Designer. And it says, "Hey there, I had 2 questions after listening to your podcast." And this email had to do with OpenShot versus KDE, or Kdenlive, I should say. OpenShot versus Kdenlive. And it says, in OpenShot, you can't zoom in very close, and it's impossible to do precise movements or cuts. Are you able to use it nonetheless? To me, this is a main problem with it. Also, have you given Shotcut a try? It has an app image, and in case it's not available on your distro, the only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't do keyframes, but other than that, it's pretty solid. And I went on and I replied to Tux Designer, and I thought I'd give my thoughts on the show that I gave him. First of all, again, last week I talked about Kdenlive versus OpenShot and how I really want to move away from iMovie on the Mac. In the same process, I'm moving to Linux. I want to get as much of my stuff on Linux as I can. And with that, though, I still have to use my Mac for certain things. And when it comes to video editing on the Mac, I really do very little. I may have a live concert footage of my band, and I just want to chop out intermission and things that happen before or after my shows. Very easy edits. And so I don't really have to fine tune and zoom way in when I'm able to cut out certain parts. So I'm not actually creating a super high quality movie edit where I need to zoom in on 1 or 2 frames and get that precise cut. And however, when I was using things like OpenShot on the Mac, last week I said that it was very polished and a lot of the bugs had been removed that I had come across in the future, or in the past, sorry. And looking ahead towards the future, one of the things that I started coming up with, the more that I used OpenShot on Mac, one of the things that I forgot to say last week in last week's episode was that OpenShot is still in beta itself. And so I'm not expecting it to be perfect. And I was having a problem last week with OpenShot where I was making a test video, and when I exported the video, it was getting all sorts of noise in the audio version, audio that was included with the video. So I went and I actually deleted OpenShot and I reinstalled it, and turns out another more up-to-date version of OpenShot was installed, and this sort of took care of that problem. One of the issues that I was having, though, with it is anytime that I wanted to do more than one thing in a quick succession, OpenShot would crash. So if I was trying to move ahead at a quick pace and I was doing more than one thing at a time, OpenShot would crash. And so it still has a few bugs in it that concern me. But I think now after this current install, some of those may have been taken care of. So I went on and I wanted to give Shotcut a try. And Tux Designer was right when he says that Shotcut is pretty solid. You can find Shotcut at shotcutapp.com, and it's another open source cross-platform video editor. It's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. I don't know exactly how long Shotcut has been out, but I do know that it has some very compelling options that Kdenlive and OpenShot do not have. There are some great tutorial videos right on their website, shotcutapp.com, that teach you how to use Shotcut, because it is quite different than any other video editor out there. Basically, when you open it for the first time, it looks like a media player. And this media player can play audio or video recordings of any kind. And you basically customize the layout however you want to use it. And as you start opening up various windows, getting into multi-tracking, timelines, filters, crossfades, transitions, anything like that, you start to see the power of Shotcut. Now, when I started talking last week about Kdenlive and OpenShot, I was looking for a video editor for the Mac specifically. When using Shotcut on the Mac, it was very slow. And anytime I moved video clips or imported things or shuffled timelines around, for some reason it just wasn't working the way I expected it to. And it was literally somewhere upwards of 20 seconds of time before I could move on to the next step. However, I didn't stop there. I went to Linux and I downloaded Shotcut on my Ubuntu Studio machine and my Antergos machine, and Shotcut seems to work great under Linux. So what I'm wondering is, will there be an update to the Mac version soon that will sort of maybe work out a few bugs that are in the code right now? So I'm hoping that Shotcut might be an alternative in the future, and I definitely thank Tux Designer for bringing this to my attention, because I was not aware of Shotcut. It seems to me I heard the title maybe a few months ago, but it has I've lost sight of it, and I'm glad he brought it to my attention, because it's another open source tool that some of our listeners may be interested in trying out. I have not tried the Windows version yet, but I encourage you to check that out if you're looking for any open source video editors. It does look like it's pretty solid. Other than that, I'm going to play around with it a little more over the next few weeks and see really what it has to offer. So if anybody else has tried Shotcut, please feel free to let me know what you think of it. Okay, now getting into today's topic. Today what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to take Linux one more step in the audio video production area. And this will probably be the last episode that I talk about this for a while. But again, something crossed my radar this weekend that had me intrigued. I came across an article from linuxinsider.com talking about AV Linux. And I thought it would be a good topic to talk about, seeing how for the last few weeks, my topic has really been solely focused on Ubuntu Studio and some of the things that it has to offer. So if you have listened to my review of Ubuntu Studio, this is sort of a continuation. So after reading AV Linux, this article on AV Linux, one of the things that I wanted to do was to give it a spin and see what it really has to offer. And the article that I read talked pros and cons of using AV Linux. So I tried to actually Google AV Linux, and I came across, Wikipedia page. I came across DistroWatch. So I went to DistroWatch and I tried to download AV Linux, and I couldn't get the ISO file. It would not download. So after searching around for a little bit, I was finally able to find the ISO. I found it very difficult because there wasn't really a website that I could find anywhere, and maybe I just wasn't looking in the right spot. I did find an online forum for AV Linux that had a lot of great information, but I couldn't see where to find the downloads from. So right off the bat, there was some difficulties just finding the ISO to install AV Linux. So finally, I did find it. I was able to install in a virtual machine. Because when I was reading this article from Linux Insider, one of the things that I came across was when you're first trying AV Linux, even when it's running on a flash drive, it changes the permissions for your hard drive so that it can easily import media and making things more convenient for you. Well, I didn't really like that idea of changing permissions on a hard drive when you're just trying a live environment. And I know it's for convenience sake. So right off the bat with AV Linux, which is probably a really strong competitor for Ubuntu Studio, there are things that I'm seeing that I didn't really care for. It was difficult to find the ISO, and now I'm dealing with hard drive permissions. So I decided to install it on a VM and give it a shot and take it and see what it has to offer. So first off, let's talk about some good things, okay? It was really easy to install. So AV Linux is based off of Debian, and it's been a while since I've used a straight Debian distribution. So it was kind of refreshing to see what it really had to offer. And it's a XFCE4 desktop, very lightweight, so that you can get your work done. Now, if you remember, Ubuntu Studio was also based off of XFCE. But these two have a completely different look and feel from each other. Now, one of the things that I noticed right away, there are some key applications missing with AV Linux. Number one, Kdenlive and OpenShot are both not included with the install. That's not a difficult thing to manage if you're using Linux. You can easily install either of the two or both of them afterwards. I just thought it was a strange choice not to include that. What it does include, right off the bat, Wine is configured to run Windows programs. So I really enjoyed seeing that. And a lot of XFCE tools that I'm unfamiliar with are also included. Now, I said in my Ubuntu Studio review that XFCE is not something that I'm entirely familiar with. It is not my preferred workflow. The desktop environment, for me, doesn't really cut it with things that I like to do. I do understand its importance, however, for giving you the option of having more resources on your computer given to the applications that you're using. So if you're using things like Ardour or Blender or Inkscape, they're going to take a lot of resources. So you don't want your operating system to get into the way of what you're trying to accomplish. So I understand why projects like AV Linux and Ubuntu Studio chose XFCE. And from what I have read, coming now from this latest version of AV Linux, is that this is a complete rewrite of prior releases. So this is a brand new version of AV Linux, completely separated from any other release that has happened in the past. Saying that, I think that AV Linux gives a polished look. It looks very modern. They have some really neat backgrounds that they have included that really make you feel like you're sort of an audiophile, where you are ready to work and you're ready to get your audio recordings done, video recordings done. It just makes it feel like it's a production machine, which is kind of neat. They went the extra lengths to make it look and feel modern. AV Linux is great because you can run it from a flash drive itself. You don't need to actually install it on a computer. So that makes it portable, which is a compelling option if you're looking for something like that. If you don't want to install right onto an actual machine, you can use it in a live environment. So it really does have some compelling features. Now, one of the things that I tried to do right away, being Debian based, it's been a while since I used Debian. I'm familiar with Debian, but it's been a while. On the taskbar down at the bottom of AV Linux, it gives you two options to access a terminal. It gives you the XFCE terminal. It actually gives you a root terminal. It opens as root, and you type in your password, and you're automatically logged in as root. And so what I did is I opened the root terminal, and I wanted to install some software. I typed in my password. I was logged in as root, and I wanted to install VLC. So I sudo apt-get, or I was logged in as root, so I just said apt-get install VLC. VLC wasn't found. Apt-get install Rhythmbox. Rhythmbox wasn't found. Apt-get install OpenShot. Kdenlive. Time after time, it was not finding any software. So am I connected to the internet? So I pinged Google. I'm connected to the internet. Okay, that settles that. So immediately I checked the repositories. The repositories all look good. What's causing the problem? I don't understand. Why can't I download software? Has it been that long since I used Debian that there's hardly any software available in repositories? I can't be it. It's got to be something that I'm doing wrong. So I said, okay, maybe the repositories didn't update during install. So I did apt-get update, apt-get upgrade. And as I went through that, apt-get upgrade managed to complete, update managed to complete, and upgrade didn't. What is going on? I don't understand. So then a few minutes later, what I did is I decided to try, instead of the root terminal, I just tried the XFCE terminal. And so logging into the XFCE terminal, I did sudo apt-get update, sudo apt-get upgrade. And my username was not in the sudoers file. So I said, okay, here we go. Log into root. So I did su, logged into root, did sudo apt-get update, sudo apt-get upgrade. Everything went through. I said, okay, that's great. So apt-get install VLC. Boom, there's VLC. Then I installed all the other software that I could use and that I wanted to use. I don't understand the difference between root terminal and XFCE terminal, why that would make a difference. But there is both to offer there, and they're side by side, and maybe that's my lack of experience. I've never seen the root terminal before, and when it came to using XFCE. So if you're trying AV Linux and you're trying to install software, try to use the XFCE terminal and make sure you're logged in as root. So those are just a couple of things that I ran into. Overall, AV Linux looks like a strong competitor to Ubuntu Studio. It has some different applications than Ubuntu Studio does. For instance, it uses having trouble pronouncing the video editor, Cinderella, the video production tool, Cinlera, I think that's what it's called. It includes things like Handbrake and other production tools, other media players, screen recorders, does have Ardour and Audacity, has some audio production tools as well. It does include MuseScore and Hydrogen, just like Ubuntu Studio. It doesn't have the photography tools as much in this case. It does come with Blender and Inkscape, but does not have Darkroom or GIMP installed. Doesn't even have LibreOffice installed, and maybe they're going to save room on their ISO because the ISO itself, I think, was over 3 gigs in size. So maybe they're just trying to look and save room on their size for their ISO file. And again, you can install all these pieces of software afterwards, but it does have some different tools. And if you're interested in learning about what's available, I think AV Linux would be something you should take a look at, definitely. For me, it's not something that I'm going to keep installed. I may keep it in a VM for a few weeks to try and learn some of these other pieces of software that I've never seen before. and sort of learn it, use it as a stepping stone and see if there's something that I've been missing in the long run. And maybe I will find a use case for AV Linux down the road, but I'm not going to dedicate a machine to it just yet. But I'll let you know if that changes. What it did for me, though, is it makes me want to take a look at Debian one more time. It has been probably about 4 years since I've really looked at Debian and what Debian has to offer. And when it comes to using Linux, I've talked about wanting to be on the sort of bleeding edge of things. With that comes the vulnerabilities of making a human error or user error and really sort of messing up a system and having to reinstall if you make a mistake or if you're not paying attention when you update. And I may have a use for a solid, slow-moving, slow-changing distribution. If I just want a machine that I can install and not make a whole lot of changes to, not make a whole lot of, once everything's installed and ready to go, not wanting to take any chances with. And Debian really may have improved to a point where it has a use for me. And so I may take a look at Debian over the next few weeks and see if I can try either Debian stable or Debian testing and see what it has to offer now. And maybe something like Debian with GNOME or Debian with a Mate desktop might be something that I'm leaning more towards. I will say AV Linux has a really nice XFCE look to it, just like Ubuntu Studio has their own look and feel using XFCE desktop. They're really one of the better looking XFCE installs that I have seen. So now I want to go back and see if there are other desktops environments with Debian that are more geared towards what I would need. And maybe I'll do a future review on that. Who knows? Because here's the deal. I'm looking at Linux, and I've been looking at Linux for a really long time as something that I see not as something that's perfect, not as something that is flawless. I see Linux as something different than what other people are using out there. So I like to be different. I see Linux as something that is community driven with no sinister agendas behind, and something that gears towards its users rather than its business model for the future. I don't see any of those with Windows or Mac. So as I look towards using Linux more and more, and Mac and Windows less and less, I need things like iTunes alternatives. And I've used Rhythmbox, and I've taken a look at Clementine, and they're both compelling, but they really aren't strong alternatives to iTunes. So if you've got an iTunes alternative out there, please send me an email with some feedback. I'd love to check some of these things out. I haven't looked in great detail, but I really would like to start looking at all of these different tools that are available. I've had conversations with people about Plex, and I started to use Plex a long time ago. I sort of steered away from it. That might be an option. So if you have any input or if you have anything to talk about and you want me to review something or me to bring something up that maybe I haven't taken a look at or I haven't discussed in great detail, shoot me an email. It's mrptechreviews@gmail.com. And if you'd like to help us out in any way, if you're doing some holiday shopping over the next few weeks and you listen to not only my podcast but other podcasts on the Podnuts network, maybe support Podnuts. If you're shopping on Amazon, you can go to www.podnuts.com/Amazon. It doesn't cost you any extra, and you can support the Podnuts network just by doing any of your shopping on Amazon through the affiliate program. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/MrpTech. And you can also check out my YouTube channel by searching for MrpTech. At some point, when I get a few minutes, I will post a few more videos up there as well. I've got a lot of great ideas for this show. I hope you're enjoying this process of reviewing and talking about Linux and what it has to offer in regards to everyday people and what they can use Linux for, or even just some of the software that's available that's open source that you can use on Windows and Mac. So if you're enjoying this, give me some ideas. I love the feedback. I'm getting more and more every week. And thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.